All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very warm welcome to today's EUKI Academy web seminar, Clean Industrial Deal in CEE, Opportunities and Challenges, which we have organized in very close cooperation with E3G. My name is Julia von Fiebern and I'm the EUKI Academy coordinator, and it's my pleasure to open this session and introduce you to a topic that's currently at the center of many discussions. Since its publication at the end of February, the Clean Industrial Deal has been on everybody's lips. And in this web seminar, we'll take a closer look at its implications from two angles. One from the regional perspective of Central Eastern Europe and the climate policy perspective. And together we'll explore both the opportunities and the challenges the CEE region faces in implementing the Clean Industrial Deal. And we'll also discuss how the EU can best support the region's decarbonization needs, leverage its competitive strength, and foster a forward-looking industrial transformation. So if you have any questions or comments during the session, please feel free to post them in the chat. We'll gather them for a Q&A at the end. And with that, thank you once again for joining us. And now over to our moderator, Alexandra Waliszewska from E3G, who will present our panel and will dive into the topic with you today. The floor is yours, Alexandra.
Thank you, Julia. A very warm welcome from my side as well. My name is Alexandra Waliszewska. I am a senior researcher at E3G working on industrial decarbonization. And I will have the pleasure of moderating today's conversation. So we have a great panel with Ms. Marzena Rogalska from DG Klima. We are also joined by from the think tank Energy Policy Group, Fotios Kalantzis from the European Investment Bank, and Susanna Kat from Cleantech for CEE. So I think we're going to have a very rich discussion today. And some of our panelists have also prepared impulse presentations, which we will hear very shortly. And again, encouragement from my side as well to post your questions in the chat or think of questions you would want to ask and who you want to pose them to the audience, since we will have a section towards the end of the webinar where you will get an opportunity to ask them. So without further ado, I would to give us the first scene set of presentation on the Clean Industrial Deal.
Welcome and thank you for the initiative and in the invitation. So in order to set the scene, maybe I should mention that as we speak, there is a very important conference taking place, Clean Tech Conference, an annual event by DG Klima with the opening by President and with remarks from Kurt van der Berger. So I hope that you manage to join online at least later. The conference is the holiday conference, but kicking off your discussion. So obviously the Clean Industrial Deal that and accompanying documents that were adopted on the 26th of February, they are not in vacuum. They are one of the main deliverables, first deliverables under the competitiveness compass that was presented earlier. And under the competitiveness compass, you might remember there are three pillars. Pillar one, closing the innovation gap. Pillar two, a joint roadmap for decarbonization and competitiveness. And then pillar three, focusing on reducing excessive dependencies and increasing society security. So the pillar two, the first big implementation, the Clean Industrial Deal, was accompanied by the action plan on affordable energy with the omnibus package that also contained three relevant for climate policy and for the simplification agenda items concerning CBAM, concerning the financial climate disclosure and the reporting and due diligence directives. You might know that the proposal from the Commission has actually met with positive passage throughout the Parliament. It was a bit of a test how this will work for the future. So this hurdle has been overcome, and there is a feeling that Commission is simplifying, but simplifying does it not mean deregulating. I hear, especially in Central Eastern Europe, lots of word about the deregulation. I had a chance to speak in Warsaw a while ago, and media especially talks about deregulation. I do assure you, this is simplification, changing. So without change of the level of ambition, there is a recognition that certain flexibilities needs to be introduced for the implementation for the transitory period, but the level of ambition stays there. So back to Clean Industrial Deal. As you know, it has 6 pillars. So under Pillar 1, we talk about affordable energy and infrastructure. Under Pillar 2, we talk about the lead markets, so how to boost supply and demand for near zero and low carbon products. Then we talk under Pillar 3 about public and private investments. And here there is a reference, and I will come to it, about a new decarbonization bank. Pillar 4 is the focus on circular economy, geared towards securing access to materials and resources. You could read in newspapers, announcements, minerals deal here, minerals deal there, the things that are available on our. So it's not only a debate about, restricting the scrap. It's generally, the materials that are contained in the products that we already have on the market. Pillar 5, it's devoted to global markets and international partnerships, and in particular announcement of a new element of the wide trade and investment instruments called Clean Trade and Investment Partnerships. You might have heard that on 18th of March, during the EU South Africa summit, the negotiations of such an instrument have been launched. So it will become a blueprint. However, it is meant to be a very agile instrument that can be easily adapted, A, to the current situation, B, also to already existing map of engagement with a given partner, external partner. And then the Pillar 6 is on skills, quality jobs, and social fairness. So I said that I will come back specifically, zoom in on public and private investments. So the biggest attention, I think, that we would like to draw you, which is also particularly close to the service that I'm representing, DG Klima, and this is namely the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, with announced amount of 100 million euros to be mobilized. And the work has already obviously started, the preparatory work, but there is an intention that, building on the lessons learned under the Innovation Fund, a very successful instrument that is systematically oversubscribed, sometimes up to 6 to 7 times. We intend to run a first pilot for this bank, which still be financed from Innovation Fund in the Q4. We would like that call to be co-created with the stakeholders to ensure that it meets the needs across sectors and across geographies, because it has to be it is improving, but still obviously the geographical balance of applicants, number of applications, I'm not referring to number of successful ones, but number of applications is still tilted towards certain geographies than the others. Under this pillar, also there is an announcement of amendment of EU Invest for additional mobilization of the guarantees, which were especially popular with under the wind energy action plan and the counter guarantees from EIB. And then thirdly, national financing, so recommendation for tax incentives to support green industrial deal objectives, as well as further flexibilization of state aids. And I mentioned already the innovation fund as the the precursor of the decarbonization bank. We pay lots of attention to innovation funds because it has proven its real competitive innovation driven value, so rewarding the best. And the whole idea behind the clean industrial deal, speaking to perhaps those who view the Green Deal differently, not like DG Klima, this is not an attempt to put additional money to the industry that doesn't do anything. This is a business proposition, a business deal to the first runners, those who took the risk and invested. And this is a very heavy investment. Transitions in energy and decarbonization is not like you buy a server and put in your cellar and you are a digital startup. They take time, they take money, and anything that is coming to the market, it is by definition more expensive. So this is the idea behind the Green Deal, is to support those who are the early movers into a deep-scale decarbonization in line with the EU international commitments and EU law that inscribes the net zero target in its climate law. So encouragement, especially in this forum dedicated to the discussion of the items specific for Central and Eastern Europe, I would very much encourage interest in Innovation Fund. We are providing outreach activities. We would like the companies to know that the fund exists. Yes, it's oversubscribed. Yes, the effort may not pay immediately out, but it's coming and it will be in bigger scale. And we really believe in competitiveness based on industrial decarbonization driven by innovation. And that's what is the idea behind the Decarbonization Bank. So I'm sorry that I cannot stay with you for the entire discussion, but I wanted to share this business perspective, that it's a business proposal from the Commission to make investment happen into decarbonization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Could I just ask, when do you have to jump off?
I think that around 10:30 I would have to sign up.
Okay, that's great to know. Then perhaps we'll shuffle things around a little bit, and I'll just ask you a couple of questions straight ahead now that we would have asked in the panel otherwise. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, please.
Thank you. No, this was really, really, I think, insightful as well. And I think if we could maybe dive a little bit more into detail into the specific elements of the Clean Industrial Deal that you mentioned, and perhaps given your experiences with the conversation that you had in Warsaw with the leadership there, how would you see the different elements address the particularities of industrial transformation in CEE? Because obviously, I'm sure you will be aware and of this being of Polish heritage, but when we will hear about this more in the next presentation. But CEE as a region has its particularities, given that it has a large industrial base that needs to be decarbonized, but also has quite a lot of renewables potential and potential to develop clean tech value chains. At the same time, having the challenges perhaps with administrative capacity, fiscal capacity, and so on. So perhaps you have outlined specific pillars and you have outlined some specific policies. And maybe if you could dive a little bit deeper into how those specific instruments can be better tailored to CE. So you talked about the Industrial Decarbonization Bank and how you will pay attention to the geographical balance there. Perhaps you can give us some more detail there, but I think this is already a really good development. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how that will be done with regards to the flexibilization of state aid rules, or perhaps other elements of the Clean Industrial Deal. So maybe with regards to lead markets policy or green public procurement, maybe regarding review of the governance regulation and ECPs. Is there anything that can be done there to support CEE countries to faster implement industrial decarbonization strategies? So if you could dive a little bit deeper into specific policy instruments and how specific CEE challenges could be addressed there, I think we would all love to hear about this.
Well, so first of all, this package is an offer to every single member state of the European Union. So it is not meant as to be the tailor-made for, to individual situations of its members. Innovation Fund is based on excellence and on innovation. However, we foresee already now a possibility for individual member states to use service called auction as a service. What does it mean? It means that, let's say, if we have 100 euros and we selected 10 projects with 10 euros that were the best, but we have a pipeline of 7 projects with let's say 8.8, and they happen to come from the same member state X, and the member state X is interested to put their national money to finance those excellent projects because they have come through the competition, they fulfill the selection, the eligibility and selection criteria, so they are ready to go. The idea is to maintain this under the Decarbonization Bank and further facilitate that with the assumed state aid clearance. It is not there yet. It's something that we are working upon. So that leads me to your second question. It's very difficult, not even 1 month after, to give you details. All I can say is that there is a very strong political commitment and strong administrative capacity mobilization for implementation in a timely manner of this package. You have already seen the more specific action plans for individual sectors such as automotive or metals and steel sector. The others are coming. The work has started, the work on the carbon intensity approaches, on the label, but it's something that takes time, A, and B, we want to do it together with the stakeholders for stakeholders. Now, if you ask me specifically what I have heard in the interaction with the stakeholders in Poland, I met with different groups. So I was at the big conference organized by UNEP and the Grid Initiative, more with the community around, also worried about the omnibus simplification of the reporting and due diligence, and the recycling community on one hand. So I would say more like-minded audience, but I also spoke with the energy intensive industries. And I would say that there is more half glass full than half glass empty feeling. There is a conviction that Commission is serious, but I think that specifically for Poland, there was also recognition that Commission is specifically looking at the most intensive, energy intensive sector, whereas the industrial, according to them, industrial base in Poland across the board needs vast improvements, especially energy efficiency improvements. Much progress has been done on the residential side, perhaps other sectors, but when it comes to industry as general, there is still a very big potential. That's what was one topic. And the second topic, definitely in the region, because of very well developed district heating network, was the issue of heat and how to make the heat a new gold by trying to perhaps find ways of engaging between different sectors, the recipients, the producers, the regulators. For example, the collocation of new data centers close to CHP plants. So there are certain specificities, but as such, we through Clean Industrial Deal, it is an offer to everyone. But we recognize that the certain action can only be taken by national governments, and we ask the everybody to use the instruments that are there and flexibilities that are put on the table. Now, specifically to your question on national energy and climate plans, we have been saying for 2 years that those plans should be de facto investment plans, because when you talk about transition of energy intensives, you very quickly end up with the issue of energy prices for energy intensives, and then you very quickly get into the debate of increasing renewables, but increasing bottlenecks in the infrastructure. So in the end, the whole debate ends up in the infrastructure, but infrastructure not meant only as a cable, and you can argue whether it's overground or underground, social public acceptance or not. But this is entire system where you need to transition from the system with basically secure to base load to varied base load, and you need to the batteries alone will not solve the problem if we want to have 80% renewables in the energy mix. So you need to have those conversations, and that certain inputs, or whether you agree or not, that whether gas is a transition fuel or not, role of nuclear. Infrastructure is the most important issue, and here there is lots of better coordination under the 10-year investment plans of the regulators, but there is also lots of messaging from our side for those national energy and climate plans to be this investment. And in that sense, if we talk about the decentralized systems, also then the buildings become part of the energy players, etc., etc. So we are in the process of receiving the final national energy and climate plans, and around May, Commission will basically communicate the result of this exercise.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that you said NECPs should be de facto investment plans. I think that's a really good statement to make, and yeah, I trust that the Commission will do a great assessment of NECPs. Thank you so much for your participation.
We hope for very good proposals, so you can take it back to the stakeholders in the countries where you're active. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I think this is now a good segue as well to go into Luciana's presentation, because we dove into some of those regional barriers a little bit.
I will start listening and then gently say goodbye, but I start listening to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Luciana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like you said, it's a good segue into a presentation which focuses on CEE and proposes a bit of a regional approach to decarbonizing heavy industry in the region. But just to kick off, so I'm Luciana Miu. I head up the Clean Economy program at the Energy Policy Group. We are a Bucharest-based think tank. We work primarily on energy and climate policy issues, and we have a growing body of work on industrial decarbonization. So this presentation is based on a slide deck, which we published in February. It was published ahead of the Clean Industrial Deal, but working a lot off the leak that anticipated the official release. And you can find the slide deck, which goes into more detail on our website. But I'll just take you through a little bit of background and context for the work that we've done here. So our thesis is that Central and Eastern Europe has undoubtedly a lot of potential to lead clean industrial production in the EU. But this is hampered by some significant barriers across the region, which at the moment may actually prove to be showstoppers for the opportunities that we're seeing to make industrial decarbonization into a pathway for economic development. And this is particularly key given the pressure to transform existing industry, as well as enable clean tech manufacturing and participating in the clean tech race. So the Clean Industrial Deal does bring a lot of incentives for industrial transformation, which should not be missed by countries in the region. They should be taken up efficiently, and 2025 is really set to be a year of many strategies, many regulations on industry, but also on regional development. We've got the midterm review of the cohesion policy going on. We've got negotiation of the next multi-annual financial framework. So a lot of developments that CEE countries will need to be able to keep up with and take up the opportunities that they offer. So really, as the industrial strategy landscape in the EU is undergoing important shifts, it's important to act now and unlock efficiencies and align national priorities between CEE countries to ensure that the transformation proceeds smoothly. And this is really where regional coordination steps in. And we're going to briefly reflect on it, as well as on the current state of where industry is in Central and Eastern Europe, and tease some initial ideas on how it could be transformed through this regional approach. Just to mention before we go further that in our study and this presentation, we define Central and Eastern Europe as the 12 original members of the 3Cs initiative, and they overall represent a third of the EU territory, a fifth of its population, but only 10% of GDP. So let's start with taking a look at the industrial base of Central and Eastern Europe. So post-1990, Central and Eastern European countries today are really export-oriented, quote-unquote, factory economies with economically important manufacturing sectors and relatively high emissions intensities and significant decarbonization potential. These manufacturing sectors are expected to grow until 2030. Investment in transport and utilities infrastructure is above EU average and is projected to continue growing. We'll come back later to why this is important. But on the other hand, human capital and innovation capacity are below the EU average. So Martina was mentioning and hinting a little bit about the geographical imbalance of the innovation fund applications. This is something that we see when it comes to overall innovation capacity in Central and Eastern Europe. It's a complex picture of Central and Eastern European industry, but there are significant opportunities to really reshape the way it looks. There are opportunities to access EU funding, to launch new markets, and to transform industry in a way that makes it the engine of convergence of Central and Eastern Europe with the rest of the EU. And it goes without saying, obviously, that this industrial transformation will necessarily involve decarbonization. The only way that industries can remain competitive in the face of high energy prices, as well as the global race to decarbonize, and the geopolitical implications of continued fossil fuel use, and will require a massive overhaul to take up new technologies and processes, business models, and supply chains, and build out new infrastructure, which is a key element that we're going to return to when it comes to regional coordination. I'm happy that it was mentioned earlier by Martina as well as a key element for regional level decarbonization of industry. But all of this transformation will also require the design and implementation of new policy and financial mechanisms for industrial transformation. And this comes with a significant bill for institutional capacity. So one of the things that is maybe not missed, but a little bit sidelined in the conversations around access to funding and infrastructure is the institutional capacity that's required to actually make these a reality. Financial mechanisms, and new policies, plans for infrastructure, these all require administrative and institutional capacity, which in certain Central and Eastern European countries is lacking. But there are some good examples of Central and Eastern European countries which are progressing industrial transformation and investing in clean tech. We've got state aid programs for industrial decarbonization in Czechia and in Romania. We've got massive investments in Polish and Hungarian battery manufacturing, transition plans across the board, across the region, announced by major steel and cement producers. But overall progress is much slower than in Western Europe, obviously hampered by the recent energy crisis, which has forced shutdowns in quite a few of these countries exposed to high natural gas prices, And there are major bottlenecks that do need to be overcome to get industrial transformation on track. And one of these bottlenecks that I'd like to highlight, and we'll return to a bit, I think, in the panel discussion as well, is the relative absence of regional coordination efforts, because such regional coordination can really unlock efficiencies in planning industrial transformation. And this type of regional coordination can also ensure more efficient public spending. And this is going to be essential given the potential reprogramming of EU funds and the ongoing negotiations with the multi-annual financial framework, which will likely affect Central and Eastern European countries. So just to give a bit of a view of what's at stake for industry in Central and Eastern Europe, it will require much effort, and it's worth reinforcing exactly how important it is to do it. So firstly, the competitiveness of heavy industry will suffer significantly if decarbonization is not implemented. And this is not just because of industrial producers having to cope with carbon prices, but also to reduce dependence on imports and revitalize economically challenged regions and improve offerings of industrial products within the region. Heavy industry is not the only one at stake as well. So there are two important downstream industries, which are construction and automotive. So these are important industries for Central and Eastern European countries, and they are growing. And these industries can become big buyers of clean industrial products and really get ahead of the curve when it comes to choosing these types of products, as is increasingly required and pushed by EU policy. And here we have to talk about green public procurements, which will be key to launching a market for green construction products, as well as private sector initiatives and incentives, especially for the automotive sector, which is itself at a critical juncture in the EU. Saying all of this, competitiveness is not the only element here, and pinpointing where to focus industrial transformation efforts also needs to look at socioeconomic and strategic autonomy aspects. But ultimately, if a regional approach is adopted, the benefits of this transformation not only serve local industries, but they can also spill over beyond national borders, which will foster cohesion and improve the outlook for the region and for Europe as a whole. The second part of what's at stake is looking towards the future. And when we talk about future industries, we're talking about clean tech, which transforming industry also affects Central and Eastern Europe's options for participating in the clean tech race, which is very much on, and it could reach significant heights by the end of the decade. I'm sure Susanna will come on into this a lot more in the panel discussion. But it's a significant race to be in because clean tech development does bring both economic and spillover benefits, such as research and innovation, and it can ensure that Central and Eastern European industries needing to decarbonize have access to domestic clean tech and that they become competitive exporters of such clean tech. But all these opportunities do come against the background of really a two-speed development when it comes to innovation, within which Central and Eastern Europe overall is still lacking as far as clean tech goes. Poland and Czechia are frontrunners in the region. There's some very promising regions in terms of clean tech ecosystems, as you can sort of see on the right-hand side. But to replicate this across the region, national policies and investments will be required, and regional collaboration will be important to transfer knowledge. And last but not least, I wanted to revisit a little bit the importance of infrastructure development. So infrastructure development is only projected to increase, especially if we consider emerging clean tech production. For example, Czechia is investing in its motorway network to support new industrial clusters. And one key element that we will need to anticipate is post-war reconstruction efforts in the Ukraine, which would be most efficient if led by Europe and with significant input from the Central and Eastern Europe region. The development of infrastructure does benefit from ample funding. We have primarily through the cohesion policy funds, but at the same time, EU regulations are poised to ensure that this future infrastructure development uses low carbon construction materials where possible. So we're anticipating the emergence of low carbon. Sorry about that. If there's background noise, there's somebody dragging a desk around here in my office. But just to sort of wrap up on this, given all of these opportunities, and a sore need for efficient public spending due to narrow fiscal spaces across Central and Eastern European countries, infrastructure spending will be a key lever to incentivize industrial transformation and make low carbon infrastructure a reality. So I do hope we can maybe come back to this a little bit in the panel discussion. Just wanted to talk a little bit about how we can propel industrial transformation in Central and Eastern Europe. So it's just a very quick, and sorry for the slide being quite dense here, but it's trying to pack in the benefits of potentially a regional approach in Central and Eastern Europe that is rooted in industrial clusters. So the region does have significant clusters of large heavy industry facilities. They're important, sprawling, interland clusters, home to a variety of different industries. which as local agglomerations already bring efficiency gains, which can be further exploited in industrial transformation. They're often integrated into regional production network. They have good cross-border linkages and cross-border specialization. And it's a good position to start from, but to really exploit the efficiencies and synergies that come from industrial clustering, Central and Eastern Europe needs to progress beyond the typology of being a factory economy and seriously invest in innovation. One other important aspect here are the three Cs, the Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Sea. They provide access to key trade routes for the region. Along some of their coasts, there are additional industrial clusters that can benefit from shared infrastructure and resource exploitation, for example, offshore wind and CO2 storage. The efficiencies of this clusterization will also be essential when we talk about low carbon industry, where resource and infrastructure sharing models are going to be key. And the existing clusters that we see now can also attract ancillary clean tech industries, for example, low carbon hydrogen production or carbon capture and storage services. And they can also serve as test beds for clean tech industries to innovate. So having these large industrial plants open to piloting and demonstrating clean tech technologies can further create efficiencies in moving forward low carbon industry. A particularly interesting type of region are coal regions. So these have the potential to transform into renewable energy and hydrogen production hubs. So you can see on the right-hand map just there the important solar energy potential that we see in some of the coal regions across Central and Eastern Europe, especially Romania and Bulgaria. Following on from that, some countries can become hubs for carbon capture and storage or for hydrogen production due to their natural resources, and new clean tech hubs can emerge as well. One thing to mention is that if Net Zero Industry Act targets are to be met, exports of electric vehicle batteries, heat pumps, wind turbines, and solar panels from Central and Eastern European countries could triple, and some countries are already exploiting this potential. So moving forward on to the importance of a regional approach. So if we look at the current industrial clusters and the potential low carbon industrial clusters, we can see that a regional approach to industrial transformation can unlock efficiencies in planning. A regional approach can ensure that key inputs such as renewable energy, hydrogen, CO2 transport and storage are available across the region. You can see in the right-hand image that up to 19 gigawatts of offshore wind power could be built in the Baltic and Black Seas by 2030, and expanding interconnection capacities in northern and southern CEE could help channel this produced energy to meet industrial demand across the region. An integrated infrastructure planning across countries and across sectors allows for the combined utilization of energy carriers and infrastructure, avoiding unnecessary oversizing of infrastructure and helping to balance supply and demand of inputs across the region. For example, regional planning of electricity infrastructure can help improve the economics of industrial electrification. For example, these cross-border networks can help smooth out regional demand patterns, reducing the curtailment of intermittent renewable sources and also the volatility in power prices, which is going to be quite important given that Central and Eastern European countries are exposed, the energy-intensive industries are exposed to some of the highest power prices in Europe. And we have some transnational energy projects already ongoing. For example, the Wind offshore wind project in the Baltic Sea, the Litpol interconnector, the Black Sea corridor shared grid expansion project. So these are already underway, and they, in addition to expanding this regional approach for electricity, green electricity for industry across the region, they can also serve as models for future hydrogen and CO2 transport networks. Now, for hydrogen, it should be noted that because of the relative absence of long-distance infrastructure at the moment, a first step towards planning should be first investigating the opportunities for co-locating production and consumption. This could be based on existing industrial hubs in Central and Eastern Europe before launching into the planning of a bigger regional network. But in the long term, Central and Eastern European countries could become cost-effective exporters of renewable hydrogen to Western Europe based on good interconnection for hydrogen transport between the two regions. And last but not least, carbon capture and storage is also a key element of heavy industry decarbonization, particularly cement and chemicals production. So because the potential for CO2 storage and the experience with CO2 storage on the subsurface varies across the region, cross-border CO2 transport will be essential. And CO2 storage hubs will most likely emerge in the region as well. A regional CO2 transport network could be more economical than a pan-European network. It could have future interconnection capabilities built in and could make good use of the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic Seas potential for CO2 storage offshore. Now, one thing to mention is that because even if we talk about sort of regional planning of carbon capture and storage, we do have some emitters that will need CCS, which are dispersed. For example, cement emitters, obviously they tend to be located near their sources of raw material. Often this is quite far from industrial hubs. So the regional development of CCS should consider for these emitters, if possible, the co-location of capture, utilization, and storage, and multimodal transport to ensure that access to CO2 storage is fair. So this is, again, something to bear in mind with a regional approach. We want to unlock efficiencies, but we also want to stay fair. We want to ensure that all industry across the region has a fair chance to access the resources and inputs it will need to decarbonize. And just to very quickly mention that the transport infrastructure is another key aspect of regional planning. So the 3Cs initiative is itself based on the importance of north-south transport infrastructure links. These are key to economic growth. But road and rail infrastructure is still underdeveloped in Central and Eastern Europe compared to Western Europe. And the development of transnational transport infrastructure can encourage industrial growth through, for example, intensified trade, but it can also incentivize low carbon industrial production for construction materials if environmental procurement criteria are applied in public procurement across the region, especially with regards to asphalt and concrete for roads and steel for rail development. So overall, this sort of regional approach can help reduce the required increase in national capacities, for example, electricity transmission capacities or hydrogen transport, more so than a siloed approach where each country is sort of doing its own planning, doing its own thing. But it may mean more ancillary services as well. So we may have to invest more, for example, in electricity storage and also cross-border transmission capacities if we adopt such a regional approach. But overall, it is modeled to be more efficient than a siloed national-based approach. Just to wrap up, we have a couple of policy recommendations, both for Central and Eastern European governments and for the EU, and I'll just walk you through these really quickly. So starting with Central and Eastern European countries, firstly, adopt a regional and coordinated approach to clean industry. By doing this, countries can leverage their comparative advantages. They can unlock efficiencies through resource and infrastructure sharing and support new regional markets. And such a regional approach could be rooted in competitive industrial clusters, but also considering strategic issues such as socioeconomic impact and strategic autonomy. The second recommendation to national governments is to really align national climate, industrial development, and innovation policies. We really need coherence across these national policies. It's going to be key to enable a coordinated approach across the region, ensure investor certainty, and avoid inefficiencies in the implementation of incentives for industrial decarbonization. We're no longer talking about, again, giving free money to industry, but rather creating the enabling conditions for these first runners to move forward and for the perhaps those that are a little bit further behind to be able to access the know-how and the support to follow. And the third recommendation nationally is to earmark funds for industrial transformation, deploy new funding instruments. CEE countries should increase their absorption of available EU funding, but also develop their capacity to deploy novel funding instruments, strengthen climate conditionalities on their existing subsidies, and invest in research development and innovation, as well as leveraging their spending on infrastructure to incentivize green industrial production. Towards the EU, the recommendations that we put forward are firstly to ensure that the policy package that's following the Clean Industrial Deal avoids a two-speed Europe. So the policies scheduled to emerge in 2025 must all maintain an assurance that intra-EU industrial relocation, does not occur because of oversized and unsustainable subsidies offered through state aid and in the absence of an EU-wide fiscal redistribution system. Now, there are some indications of a sort of favoring of certain eastern border states, for example, in the midterm review of the cohesion policy, but this is based on relative exposure to geopolitical risk rather than on the potential of industrial transformation and economic development. The second recommendation is to maintain regional development funding and link it more strongly to industrial decarbonization. Now, raising the funding required for the transition will require more targeted and focused use of public funding, and regional development funding is an essential instrument, will remain one for advancing Central and Eastern European economies and can be leveraged for industrial transformation. And last but not least, strengthen national planning. So again, I was happy to hear the NECPs mentioned. The EU could really leverage, even going forward, the future revision of its governance regulation to ensure that member states anticipate their infrastructure, energy, resource, and market creation needs to enable a successful transformation, including through their national energy and climate plans, as well as making use of the competitiveness coordination tool. I will leave it at that. As I mentioned, the publication is available on our website, and I'm available for questions during the panel discussion or during the Q&A. But for now, I think I will pass it back to Alexandra, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Luciana. This was really insightful, and I'm keen to pick your brains about it later on in the panel, and hopefully your fire alarm drill doesn't take you away from your computer for too long. I would start with the panel discussion now. So I would first ask Fotios from European Investment Bank to come in on this. But I would like the panelists to start with initial statements. So introduce yourselves and comment on the impulse presentations we've just heard. And perhaps I would like to also throw a general sort of twofold question to the room. First, why do you think that the CEE region has the potential to remain a European industrial powerhouse, and how perhaps that you could leverage this competitive advantage of the region to benefit the whole bloc? And the second part of the question would be, what are still the steps needed to decarbonize CEE's industrial sector? And perhaps to what extent can those be addressed by the Clean Industrial Deal? So this is just my suggestion. Feel free to come in on any of the previous impulse presentations. And with that, I would pass over to Fotios.
Thank you, Alexandra. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I will start sharing my screen because I have a couple of slides. Okay. All right. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to contribute to this interesting discussion. We heard this morning from DG Climate about the Clean Industrial Deal. It is clear that this is not another policy framework. It's a transformative strategy for the Europe's industrial future. And then from EPG, from the presentation, we realized that Central Eastern Europe, the industry in Central Eastern Europe, can play a vital role in this transformation. So what I'm gonna do in the next couple of minutes will be to share some insights from our investment report that was published in March to complement the previous speakers by focusing on energy costs, emission trends, green investment trends, and green skills in the region. So I will not touch upon all the key features that it was discussed by Marcena earlier. So let me start with the energy cost and competitiveness, the elephant in the room. The graph on the left shows that what we knew, that retail prices for the industrial consumers are much higher in the EU than the US. It was 2 times in the past, but after the energy crisis, it went up to 3 times or even more. And the right graph shows what firms tell us in our investment survey, where we interviewed 12,000 firms in the EU and around 1,000 in the US, tell us that energy cost in Europe is an important obstacle. And actually, if we focus on manufacturing firms, we will see that this gap between EU and US firms is much wider, and especially for Central Eastern Europe. And that brings me to the next slide, which actually is about the competitiveness, where again, based on our survey, the left graph shows that for Central Eastern Europe, firms are spending more on energy compared to their revenues. in comparison to the other EU regions. And the main reason, if we move to the right graph, it will be that Central Eastern Europe European firms are not implementing state-of-the-art technologies. This year we had an analysis in the investment report. We have all the details there, where we implemented a stochastic frontier analysis, and we tried to rank firms based on their energy use for a given output and inputs, for example, capital expenditure and labor. When it comes to decarbonization in the Central Eastern Europe, what we see in the left graph is that the industrial sector has made some progress, but still there are more that could be done, let's say, in order to decarbonize their activities. What we see is that the technical savings was the biggest, let's say, thanks to the energy efficiency, they managed to decarbonize their activities together with a cleaner fuel mix, the decarbonization which we see in this graph. Nevertheless, we know that in order to decarbonize the industrial sector, we need to implement technologies that are not mature yet, for example, hydrogen technologies and carbon capture and storage. But then we also need to electrify industrial activities, and the right heat plot on the right side shows that in countries located in Central Eastern Europe, the electrification remains really low compared to Western Northern Europe. So it is an area where they need to invest more and do more. Now, when it comes to investments, green investments, the Sustainable Finance Platform published a report according to which we saw that in 2023 it was a record year with 250 billion of investments that were taxonomy aligned. Nevertheless, the graph on the left shows that in Central Eastern Europe, not many firms had taxonomy aligned investments. So again, it looks like they're lagging behind compared to Western Northern Europe and Southern Europe. And then the graph on the right shows that while we know that bond issuing is a primary source for financing green investments, again, firms in Central Eastern Europe are lagging behind in green bond issuing, for example. Moving now to clean tech, which is growing in the EU, and the map on the left, while it shows that in Central Eastern Europe, there are fewer facilities compared to Western Northern Europe. Still, we know that in Poland and Hungary, for example, they have the highest battery cell manufacturing capacity in Europe, which is a good sign. Again, the negative news is that on the right-hand side, what we see is that based on our survey, when we are asking manufacturing firms to tell us what are the obstacles that they face for investments, one of the biggest obstacles to them is, besides the energy cost and the uncertainty about the future, is the availability of skilled staff, which is important, especially for clean tech and green investments. So to summarize, Central Eastern Europe has a chance to lead, not lag, in Europe's industrial future, but success depends on targeted investments, smart policies, and workforce that are ready for the challenge. The Clean Industrial Deal give us the tool, but we must use them wisely. Last but not least, the EIB is ready to support this transformation with financing and expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
And
much,
now back
Fotios.
to you,
Thank
Alexandra.
you. Thank you. I think also for the interest of Luciana's schedule, I'm happy for you, Luciana, to come in second with any remarks on Fotios's input or general remarks on the previous question that I asked. So why do you think the CEE region has the potential to remain an industrial powerhouse, and how can this be an opportunity for the EU itself? And if you could highlight again one or two key initiatives in the Clean Industrial Deal to help with the particular challenges that CEE faces, yeah, then we can go further with the panel and hopefully give you time for the fire drill.
Yeah, I do apologize in advance if it comes in as I'm speaking. But no, it was a very interesting presentation from Fotios. I was actually screenshotting all of the slides and sending them to my team because we know sort of overall the issues facing financing in Central and Eastern Europe, but to see the sort of data and also the reporting from stakeholders on the impact of energy costs was very, very interesting. But no, regarding CEE's industrial potential, I mean, there's an industrial legacy in Central and Eastern Europe that I think can be exploited. But as Fotio said, you know, the opportunities that we have need to be exploited in a smart way. So thinking about the industrial facilities that we still currently have and the fact that industry contributes so much to national economies and so much to employment means that they're politically salient topics. So we do have already that point of entry in terms of talking about industrial transformation and having an ear to listen. Again, it doesn't come for free. A lot of changes, I think, need to be made. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is, again, sort of institutional capacity that's required to make this transformation happen. So even looking at things like, you know, government issued finance instruments or green bonds and things like that, we worked on a proposal for how carbon contracts for different scheme could work to decarbonize Romanian cement and steel production. And there's so many design elements that even we as sort of experts, it takes some time to wrap your head around them. Never mind, you know, institutions and authorities that are already overwhelmed with trying to keep up with the EU's policy priorities, and where non-reimbursable grant funding has been the default for such a long time. So I think in terms of leveraging, one of the things that's maybe not talked about so much from the Clean Industrial Deal is this focus on jobs and skills, because we focus on jobs within industry, but perhaps we need to also start looking at jobs and skills within the enabling framework to make industrial transformation happen. And so this is looking at, again, at civil service, right? And that's my cue. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Yes, good luck with the fire drill. I don't know, Fotios, if you want to respond to anything that Luciana has been saying about your presentation. That could be a good moment for this.
I think that thank you. I think that we are both aligned. I mean, I fully agree with Luciana that Central Eastern Europe economies are change, and the industrial place in Central Eastern Europe represents a high share in terms of their economy and, of course, employment. It is clear that we need public investments, especially in infrastructure, in order to crowd in private investments. It is clear that that energy cost is an important issue for Central Eastern European industrial firms from our survey. So it means that they have to invest a lot in energy efficiency, and this is what we are observing, let's say, in our survey, because they are catching up with firms in West and Northern Europe that are leading, let's say, this trend. Then we have seen, as I mentioned in my presentation, that in Central Eastern Europe there is the greatest manufacturing capacity in battery cells. Of course, there is a potential for other clean tech, let's say, products. For example, heat pumps, hydrogen, etc., etc. It is important to upgrade skills, as I mentioned, in the region, because the region has a competitive advantage in terms of labor costs. Imagine if they manage, let's say, also to reduce their energy costs by being more energy efficient, then it will be good. And of course, we should never forget that Central Eastern Europe has strategical position, let's say, in terms of geography. So it can link Western and Southern Europe. So all these things taken together, it means that the potential is great for Central Eastern European industries.
Thank you so much, Fotios. I can see that Luciana is back.
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
Maybe just one more point before you move on to the panel discussion in terms of the potential. I also return here to the development of infrastructure, right? Because we're seeing above EU average investments in both transport and utilities infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe. This is projected to increase, and this has such great potential to be a lever for green steel, green cement, green construction materials production, especially if we're talking about local or regional markets as well. So just to emphasize that, in addition to what Fotios said, which I was hearing a little bit through the fire drill announcements. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that because I know you want to bring Susanna in as well.
Yes, well, this is where we come in, saying that I think we will be limited to a discussion between us because we just got a call from Susanna that she is running late, so she might not be able to make it to the panel in the end. This happens. It's not too bad. I think we can have a great conversation among us, and perhaps I would ask you more specific questions to what you have just said. So maybe I'll go back to Fotios again. So you've highlighted a lot of challenges, you've highlighted a lot of areas for improvement. Are there any specific best practices in terms of both public and private finance, or very specific policies that you see as key for industrial transformation and development of clean tech value chains in the region?
Sorry, because I lost at some point. The internet connection, it was not that good. The question was addressed to me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. If you could come in on, because you've highlighted a lot of areas of challenges and areas for improvement, but also opportunities in the CEE. If you could highlight, based on EIB's research and experience, specific best practices and perhaps specific policies that can be implemented both in areas of public and private finance to help address those challenges specifically in the CEE region. Do you have any specific examples that you could bring to the discussion?
Thank you for this excellent question. Actually, we have a lot to share in the investment report, and we have many findings. The first thing is that public finance for us is an important is a catalyst, let's say, for private investment. So it's not a substitute for private investments. However, it requires a smart risk-sharing mechanism. According to our empirical research, what we have seen is that blended finance tools are effective in reducing perceived risks from private sector, and especially in clean tech. The other important factor, let's say, together with the public finance there is the policy certainty. Because we saw one of the obstacles that firms highlight and cited a lot is uncertainty about the future. That covers, let's say, many things, but especially regulations. So it is good, and it is good that the Commission came up, let's say, with this strategy, because it provides greater visibility. And then people, industries know that this is the only way forward. They cannot divert, let's say, from this path. It is important. Now, regarding the best practices, what we have seen is that what it is important is de-risking early stage projects. So projects that are less mature. We talked about hydrogen, we talked about carbon capture and storage. There was another map that I didn't share with you. What we see is that in Central Eastern Europe, most for steel industry, if I remember correctly, and iron are at demonstration stage, while in other regions, let's say they have moved forward. And it is important. Of course, we are talking about global technologies because climate change is a global challenge. And it means that if, let's say, in another country, even outside of Europe, let's say these technologies are developed, then it will be implemented, it will be adopted by the others as well. Nevertheless, that means that in such a case, you will not have the first mover advantage. This is an issue. Now, another thing that it is important, and I highlighted in my presentation, it is the green financing framework. So green bond standards, sustainable finance taxonomies in order to build trust. And the last that that it was highlighted also from Luciana is the regional coordination. So how we can benefit, because a country alone cannot move forward. We have to work all together. So, and then we can benefit from cross-border infrastructure projects, and it is especially if we want to have, let's say, to get a public support. Now, manufacturing, we said that the Central Eastern Europe has a good industrial base, especially in automotive, chemicals, and heavy industry. There are a lot of things to do with respect to clean electrification, automation. We talked about energy efficiency in order to reduce energy costs. They are performing really well in battery production and in mobility. And then other areas that they can explore is heat pumps, solar components, and hydrogen equipment, to me. So to close, I think that the most important thing is that this is an opportunity for Central Eastern Europe, but it requires a clear policy direction, strategic public investments, as we saw, in order to unlock private capital. And of course, last and not least, is stronger coordination between Central Eastern European countries and, of course, the remaining regions.
Thank you so much. I think it's really important that you mentioned sort of both policy certainty and the importance of green financing frameworks, and sort of, you know, in spirit of keeping the balance between keeping regulatory certainty and simplifying things, but not necessarily backtracking, and sort of the deregulation simplification tension that Marjana mentioned at the beginning. I think it's I think it's really a crucial point. I think before we move on to audience questions, I would like Luciana to still come in on what you have picked up on as well, Fotios, which is the regional cooperation aspects. So you mentioned, Luciana, a lot of specific benefits of regional coordination in different policy areas, specifically integrated and cross-vector infrastructure planning, as well as the benefits of European level coordination on industrial policy. So perhaps if you could dive a little bit deeper into maybe some specific initiatives, specific fora. You mentioned the 3Cs initiative, but maybe there's some other governance forms, even soft governance forms, that you see as potentially really impactful. If you could elaborate a little bit on this, I think, that would really benefit the discussion.
Yeah, so I think I'll start by sort of reinforcing a little bit the regional coordination benefits. But I think it's important for the discourse going forward to really pinpoint the one that's on everyone's mind is money, right? So the fact that regional coordination can bring cost efficiency. So if you, and this has been modeled, right, that if you adopt a multi-country approach to deploying electricity and hydrogen, and to a certain extent like CO2 transport infrastructure as well, you end up with overall lower costs, than a siloed approach because you have a reduced risk of oversizing national capacities and leading to increased costs there. But as mentioned, there's other things they need to consider, which is the cross-border connection aspect, which needs to be leveraged. And there's movement in Central and Eastern Europe on this topic, right? So we see projects of common interest. The PCI candidate list that's just come out a few weeks ago, like does include projects. In particular, CO2 networks. That's one of my main areas of focus, covering Central and Eastern European countries. I will mention that there are gaps across the region, and it's interesting to talk about a regional coordination approach, especially if you're looking at decarbonization technologies that are somewhat reliant on natural resources like CO2 storage. And I know there's a question in the chat on that, which I'm happy to come to later on as well. But if you have a natural resource like CO2 storage capacity that's varying across a certain region, you want to regionally coordinate to enable sort of access to that resource across the region. And you have notable absentees that are privy to this resource, then it becomes more difficult, and you start to see sort of like a distortion of formation of sort of pockets of cross-country cooperation rather than, you know, a broader regional approach, which could unlock even more cost efficiencies. So being able to realize these cost efficiencies is dependent on really a forum where all member countries of the Central and Eastern European region can come through and talk at a high level, sort of political dialogue, which I think we have a good fora for, especially with the Polish presidency right now. There's a good opportunity to have these conversations, but also more specific technical discussions between regulators, between infrastructure operators, to talk about the need for interconnection and how the infrastructure planning in different countries across the region, what that looks like and how it can potentially align to, again, exploit some of those efficiencies. Another sort of benefit that I would bring in, and which I think the discussion has somewhat started around this, but it's the idea of growing domestic industry. So rather than relying on continued imports, and that's something that the EU is obviously looking more and more towards, but in the region, I don't necessarily see the discussion happening at the same pace, not across all countries. So the idea of matching the supply of key inputs and the demand from industry in the long term will be greatly enabled by regional coordination as well. And finally, we have to talk about cohesion and convergence. So the whole narrative around Central and Eastern European convergence with the rest of the EU is something that that needs to be maintained, and regional coordination between the region and other regions in the EU can help enable that and avoid a two-speed transition. So in terms of the governance frameworks and fora to take this forward, there are none that come to mind at the moment, but I would again reinforce the fact that we are in the Polish presidency, and it is an opportunity for the region to come together and maybe kickstart some of these discussions and create the frameworks for continuing them in the long term. And that's on top of the, I think, existing pan-European frameworks that I think should be better utilized in Central and Eastern Europe, like the 10E and 10T frameworks. Again, going back to the projects of common interest, those are good frameworks to initiate this cross-border collaboration and regional coordination. But again, uptake and the relative presence of PCIs across Europe does indicate still some geographical imbalance. So better utilization of those frameworks, I think, as well going forward would be important. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think we can, if it's okay with you, to move to the audience questions or if you have any follow-ups.
No, thanks so much. I think really good points. I think if we leverage all of these different fora that you mentioned, then I think we will increase slowly participation also in things like industrial alliances, IPSAs, and so on. And I think that would be really beneficial for the region indeed. Yeah, we can move on to audience questions. And Luciana, you already, I think, saw some questions to you. So maybe we stay with you for a second. I also encourage people that posted those questions in the chat to just come on and ask them directly to Luciana. I think Dorota asked a question specifically. Dorota, if you would like to just come on and ask the question directly, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if you can't, I think Luciana can also just come on and address it.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Dorota Guzik from Polish network Energisite. I am just curious about the topic of carbon storage because I've heard Luciana was mentioning this topic as a complementary part of this whole transformation plan. So yeah, I don't know if you feel if you could elaborate more on that topic, because I'm especially interested how it will work, especially, and what kind of technologies do you foresee in the future? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And we work with Energicitas actually in a different project on building energy efficiency. So it's great to see the interest also in industry. So with regards, we were primarily on technological carbon sinks. So I know of natural carbon sinks as well, but it's not sort of my main area of focus. And one thing to mention is that our position at EPG is that carbon capture and storage, so technology-based industrial carbon management, is best suited for industries and emissions, which there's no alternative for abatement. So this requires very targeted application with the highest potential, I think, according to E3G's CCS ladder in terms of a ranking of different applications of CCS where it makes the most sense. Those are the cement and chemical production industries. And there's also the potential to create negative emissions through use of biomass with carbon capture and things like that. But that's something that is, I think, a little bit further afield. So we see CCS, because it's quite expensive, as an essential technology for some industries, but it will really be the contributor to the reduction of residual emissions. So once you've electrified as much as possible, once you've built out renewable energy to ensure that you're using clean electricity, once you've looked at process efficiency, you've had, as you know, you've maximized the energy efficiency benefits, and then you still have these process emissions in cement and chemicals industries. That's where you need to capture and store them. So the EU does foresee a significant role for CCS, and we agree with that it will need to be deployed at scale across the EU. But where exactly and for which types of facilities and what kind of projects we're looking at, that's something that I think we need to be quite cautious about. And in fact, we've just started a project under EUKI funding, which looks exactly at that, at Central and Eastern Europe carbon management. So looking at CCS and CCU and how, because in these countries there's already relatively low institutional capacity and understanding of what CCS and CCU are compared to countries like Norway, Germany, the Netherlands, where this has been going on for much longer. Do we risk deploying CCS projects which ultimately turn out to be inefficient because we have to reach a certain target and we haven't yet understood sort of politically and administratively that there is a difference in between how much of a climate impact they have depending on where they're applied and to which types of industries. So overall, a significant contribution, but very much geared towards those emissions that there's no alternative for abatement for. I think I would leave it at that. I hope I answered your question. Maybe Fotios wants to come in, or Alexandra as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up on the other questions from the chat. Thanks a lot, Luciana, for addressing this. There's a couple. I'm not sure exactly to whom they're targeted. So, for instance, there's a question on EU enlargement process and its relation to what we've discussed. If the person is still with us in the room, if you would like to specify maybe what you meant there, and to whom you would like to address the question.
Hello everyone, my name is Sejin and I'm coming actually from Serbia. I've been asking this question because, I do work both on EU and non-EU countries for years. So I know that all the things and decisions that have been made in EU actually do reflect on the countries, candidate countries, especially when it comes to I would say like the budgeting the future of these countries, and since you as an EU dominant like decisions requires a lot of funding, also includes the funding for the candidate countries. So I was more like wondering like when it comes to the clean industrial deal? Like, is there any like the sense of how this will affect the countries in the region, especially because, you know, there is some kind of the connection between EU and non-EU countries when it comes to especially energy density. So, I mean, if this question is complicated right now to you, please keep it to the next one. I'll be fine with that. Thank you.
Would you like to ask a specific panelist about this, or?
I think that Luciana might be the best to address, but of course the Photios is also welcome to contribute. Thank you.
I'm not sure what makes me the best person to address this, so I'll give Photios the word first and then come in if there's anything else. Thanks.
I can say, let's say a couple of things on this. I think that there are two things, because it's not only the countries that are not already, let's say, in the EU, but we have this discussion also between developed and developing countries, etc., and the ambitions that they have regarding climate. Now, what we can say is that as long as the policies are aligned, then there will not be any impact, let's say, severe impact in the region. But however, this is the role of the EIB, for example. We are the public bank in order to help, let's say, countries or industries to decarbonize, by providing finance, as I mentioned, and support. So technical advice, how they can do it. To sum up, if we are all on the same page, then it will be a win-win situation. If we are not, then of course there will be implications for the countries that they are not following, let's say, these policies. And I can give you an example, although we don't know yet how it will be implemented. Think of CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and the industrial base. So if you penalize, let's say, some industries, iron, for example, if I remember, no, or it is cement, I think, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, if the carbon intensity is much higher than the average carbon intensity of the EU, and then you would like to import cement from this country, then this country, let's say, the imports will become more expensive. So what we need there is to go and tell them how they can decarbonize, either by making, let's say, indirectly, by making their power generation cleaner, so investing in renewables, or by electrifying their activities, or other technologies that can be implemented, that they are at demonstration phase right now. So, for example, you might have hydrogen. So this is the thing to me. It can be a win-win situation or not, as long as we are on the same page. Back to you,
Thanks
Luciana.
a lot.
And
yeah, Luciana,
Yeah.
would you like to come in?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think it's once again talking about quantifying the spillover benefits of decarbonizing industry. I don't think that we're channeling funding towards industrial decarbonization will or should come at the expense of budgets that have already been ring-fenced for EU enlargement. Because I think that the opportunity for this regional coordination and expanding regional coordination across like candidate member countries as well is something that the EU knows quite well in terms of the model that we have of electricity market integration, right? The fact that we have the energy community and that the EU's energy system is integrated also with Balkans and with the Ukraine and Moldova, I think offers a good example of how sort of integration can serve to benefit across the Union. Obviously, I'm not in charge of the EU budget, and we're all kind of waiting to see how conversations go with a multi-annual financial framework. But I think that the existing cooperation and cross-border exchange of knowledge, build out of infrastructure, and so on, that we see happening with EU candidate countries as well, is a very good starting point. And I think, as Photios was mentioning, if we're all in this together, if we all work towards the same goals, then those spillover benefits can be significant as well.
Thanks a lot. I think for the sake of time, we've got 2 more questions in the chat. They're kind of in a little bit of a similar vein. One is about the expansion of renewables in CEE and sort of the mindset of the companies that see it as perhaps too costly and don't want to engage in switching to renewables, and on battery production, sort of in a similar vein, that it requires a lot of energy and mining resources. If you would like to or feel comfortable coming in on any of these questions, that would be great. Otherwise, I would ask you to provide closing statements at this stage, and perhaps if you could flag one key policy initiative after everything that we have said today that you would really like to highlight the importance of for the Clean Industrial Deal in the context of CEE. I will first pass on to Fotios.
Regarding the 2 questions, what I will say is that with the current energy prices, I think that renewables are competitive. So it means that it will be rewarding if you invest in renewables at this stage, let's say with the current prices, because the IRR will be higher. Regarding the battery production, yes, it might be an energy-intensive activity or whatever. However, we know that it is an important element because we have to have in mind the full picture, and by introducing more renewables, let's say, and replacing dirty productions, for example, coal power plants, we make the system more volatile. And that's why you need some certainty, and security of supply is one of the most important, let's say, aspect, especially not from a market perspective, if you think about after the war in Ukraine. Now, my closing statement will be that Clean Industrial Deal is a powerful tool, but the success of the deal depends on the targeted execution and regional inclusion. I think that Central Eastern Europe can lead this transformation only if the policy ambition matches the regional potential. This is back to you.
Amazing. Luciana?
Yeah, thanks. In the 1 minute, to respond to the question from Amisalu, I think technology optionality is the question here. We need a portfolio of technologies and non-technical measures as well. And the question of which one to apply where will be dependent also on a pretty robust life cycle assessment. So you did mention the energy and mining resources, the amounts of energy that are required by some of these technologies. Unless we judge the amounts of resource consumption and the climate footprint of these technological measures as well as part of a portfolio of technologies and non-technical measures to achieve net zero, we will end up with spilling over of emissions and energy consumption. For a closing statement, policy initiative, which I think will be key, I would mention carbon contracts for difference, because as Central and Eastern European countries with narrow fiscal spaces, we really need the most efficient financial instruments for dispersing public funding, and that needs to be based on the cost of a ton of CO2 abated, and carbon contracts for difference are an excellent instrument to do that. We do see movement in Greece and Poland for implementing them, so I'm hoping that they can become a much bigger part of the decarbonization trajectory in the region. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think I couldn't agree more with both of you, and I thank you a lot for this discussion today. I think we got a lot of really good points on public funding from Marzena, on de-risking, on regional coordination, and especially in infrastructure planning, policy certainty. I think we've all got a lot of great food for thought after today. So thank you a lot to Luciana and to Fotios. And with that, I pass on to Julia to talk a little bit about the evaluation survey and for closing the webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alexandra. Just a very quick thank you also from my side for joining and for posting your questions that contributed to this insightful discussion today on the Clean Industrial Deal. And we hope you found this session valuable and engaging. I would also like to extend, of course, a special thank you to our speakers, to Luciana, to Fortius, and to you as our moderator, Alexandra, and to E3G also for co-organizing this event. And before we wrap up, you saw the link in the chat. We kindly ask you to take, it's a very short survey, so just take a moment because it helps us incredibly to improve our future events, and your feedback is very valuable to us. So thank you once again for your participation, and we hope to see you again soon, and we wish you a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.